as adults, we have reference point, but not as a child when you should be out playing in the neighborhood and experiencing joy. That was, you had a different level of joy.
Different joys. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, I think of it, if I really think if there's anyone that can, anybody who's been in like a daily kind of, it feels like a war zone. I'll equate it to that. It feels like your body is in a war zone at all times.
Yeah.
And it doesn't know how to come out. And I noticing, like we're saying, like I said, noticing the crash and then being able to kind of come back to a baseline. I'm like, there's a flexibility, even though my baseline doesn't feel completely comfortable.
Right.
Or relaxed, there is a lower baseline than what I think I was living in.
And do you feel like now, you're starting to see that, and then you're gathering the tools on what you need to be able to practice parasympathetic, to be aware of when that nervous system needs to relax?
I'm like, I just take a really deep breath.
I
saw you. Yeah, I mean, yes. I have tools to be able to help myself relax, although sometimes I will feel like my nervous system is so deeply foundationally programmed in this way that I don't think I know yet, I'll say yet, what a real relaxed, like quote unquote normal nervous system feels like.
It's coming. Yeah. I am hell-bent determined to make sure you experience that. And the other part of what happens in those years, if you look at when your life was catapulted into everybody's public eye, is that's also the time you're supposed to get your parasympathetic nervous system maturing. So there's a lot of conversation about people saying, well, my teenager sleeps all the time and doesn't pick up after themselves. And they move so slow. And what they often is not well understood is that that's what's supposed to happen in the teenage years. There's a maturing of that parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what your teenage child is doing. You didn't get that opportunity. So you got to go at 40 now and really work on practicing parasympathetic, almost like a teenager would, and go back and retrain that. And, it's easy for people listening to go, well, yeah, I didn't grow up as LeAnn Rimes, but there are people who were, sexually assaulted at that age that grew up.
It's trauma, any kind of trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any kind of traumatic situation where on a daily basis, there was a continual fight or flight response. And really interesting too, because I go into freeze too, if you can't fight or flee, you freeze. And so there's and I've, what I equate relaxation to is normally a freeze response, because I feel like if I relax too much, there's no drive out of it. So my anxiety and that fight or flight actually feels like what stimulates me to do in the world,
to go.
So anytime I crash and go into what I perceive as a freeze response, because my freeze response and my relaxation are so intertwined, I fear that place, because I feel like, I'm going to get eaten alive by this relaxation thing, and I'm going to just never be able to move from it.
So, you and I've talked about the polyvagal theory, that the way that stress should happen is we should have stress. We should go into sympathetic, and then we go into parasympathetic and relax. And then we go into sympathetic, and then we go into parasympathetic. And we should be in and out of those all the time. But what you're just describing is that you went to that next layer of a nervous system, the freeze one. And that's where we want to withdraw. We want to numb ourselves with food, alcohol, drugs. It's where it's the opposite of sympathetic. We completely withdraw, which is what it sounds like. Again, I just want to point out that in this day and age, we're seeing so many teenagers go through that. They're constantly in that freeze nervous system. So just being aware of it is really important, and pulling yourself out of it in that moment and being like, I'm going into freeze, but I really need to be going into parasympathetic. How do I get there? And having tools to that is what I know you're learning to do. Just two humans interacting with two humans. If we can come with kindness and compassion, and I've really learned this in my own life of like, when I'm interacting with somebody, I know that I'm not just interacting with the face I'm seeing in that moment. I'm interacting with somebody who's cried their eyes out on the worst days, who might have some traumas, that maybe has something really some interesting story that I can learn. And I have so much compassion for that history because I don't know what it is, but it's that history that they bring to the interaction with me.